Hi guys, welcome to my government and economics presentation. Today we will be discussing the important governmental principles. And so for this assignment I was asked to choose 5. I chose types of government, what is law, the Constitution, checks and balances, and the president's power/voting. Okay, so let's start with types of government. Polity is a type of government that is based on a constitution. Polity often leads to democracy, which is what we have in the United States. It is also based on a constitution, but it's led by the people, so the people have a say in everything that goes on. The next one is monarchy. Monarchy is where you have a king or a queen, or there is a head to the government that makes all the decisions. Uh, and monarchy often leads to despotism, which is like China's case. There's still one ruler, but it's kind of like corrupt. The next one is anarchy. Um, this is where like the rich people control what's going on in society. They hold all of the power. And anarchy often leads to oligarchy, which is a small group of people having control of the country and all of what's going on with it. So an example of that would be Russia. Um, so there are 3 different categories of government. There are rule by many, rule by few, and rule by one. So what I did was I took the topics we discussed on the last slide and divided them into their category. So democracy and polity fall under rule by many. Oligarchy and anarchy fall under rule by few, and monarchy and despotism fall under rule by one. Okay, what is law? I feel that this will contribute greatly to our next few slides. So the fathers read Montesquieu and Bastiat quite a lot, and they were inspired to use that for our Constitution. Montesquieu and Bastiat contributed a lot towards our Constitution. Bastiat contributed an example of what the fathers didn't want our state to be, and Montesquieu contributed our checks and balance system, which we'll get into later slides. So next I want to go into the branches of our Constitution, and the legislative branch is where we'll start. So this can be found in Article 1 of the Constitution. The legislative branch is very important. It writes our federal laws, and so one of the checks and balances I was talking about Montesquieu contributing was the idea for when the legislative branch writes a law for it to have to be voted on not once but multiple times and then sent to the president, who can then veto the bill or sign the bill and pass it on. So that is one example. Up next, we'll talk about the executive branch. So in this branch, there are 3 main ideas discussed, which are the power of the president and his cabinet, who can be president, and electing the president. So this branch also gives direction on what to do if the president is no longer able to serve. So if he becomes incapacitated, gets impeached, dies, retires, or not retires, resigns, then it says that the vice president will take over, and then if he is incapable, the Speaker of the House will take over, and then it's a very, very long list. So to discuss one of the other main points that this branch talks about, who can be president? Well, there are 3 main regulations for that. You have to be 35 years old, a 14-year resident, and you have to be a natural-born citizen. So So next we'll be talking about the presidential powers. It seemed fitting to put this after the executive branch, since the executive branch is basically for the president. So here I included the requirements for running for president, and then things that he can and can't do. So the president can give executive orders, as I said before, but one of the checks and balances, the judicial branch can overturn his executive power and basically tell him he can't do that. Thank you, Montesquieu. And so he can also veto bills, and he can appoint federal judges, so he can put Supreme justices into the Supreme Court, and he can appoint people into his cabinet, but for both of those categories, the people have to be elected by Congress. So we'll move on to the judicial branch and talk about the Supreme Court justices. So, fun fact, there were actually only 6 Supreme Court justices to begin with, but now there are 9. And nowhere in the Constitution does it state a specific limited number on how many Supreme Court justices you have. In fact, the Constitution is surprisingly vague about the judicial branch. Seeing as it has its own article, you would think it would have a lot of rules and regulations, like the president's branch, the executive branch. But basically, they just judge things that are constitutional or unconstitutional, and pretty much all the Constitution tells is that there is no limit to their run. They can be in the court until either they die, they retire, or they get impeached. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. So we'll move on to voting. This is something that is very important in the United States. It is how our country is ran. So we vote for president every 4 years, and our vote actually doesn't go towards the president's run. It does, but it doesn't. It goes to the Electoral College, which have these people who are called electors, and they cast their vote on our behalf. So there's each state has a certain number of electors. It's according to their population on how many they have. So somewhere like California would have more than somewhere like Wyoming, just because of the population, the amount of people that live there. There are 538 electoral votes in all of the United States, and for a party to win, they need to have 270 electoral votes, which doesn't seem like a lot, seeing as there are 538, but it is a lot. And there are, as I said, certain states who have more votes than other states. So when the people are running for president, they often campaign in the bigger states to get that vote, because as long as you have the big states, it doesn't matter how many little states you have, because, well, the big states are bigger and they have more votes. So, yeah. And that is where we end. Here is my bibliography, all of the links I used. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.